Hello everybody and welcome to Comically Incompetent. My name is Doug, and this week we are continuing our anniversary month of episodes with returning guests picking the movies themselves. If you can't already tell from the title of this episode, doing Mad Max Fury Road with our special guest, Adam. Adam, how you doing?
Dude, I'm doing awesome, man. I'm just pumped after this movie. This movie just gets my veins ready to go. Yeah, how are you doing, Doug? Glad to be back.
I'm doing good. Yeah, ready to go. You haven't been on for a little while there, since the Batman trilogy.
Yeah, when we rounded it out with, and that was such a fun trilogy to do. I feel like this is kind of a really fitting movie to come like directly after that. It just kind of has a very similar level of hype and, just kind of surrounding the culture.
Exactly. Real quick, before we get into it, though, I'm going to go into the beer. This week we're doing Radioactive Fallout by Segundo Brewing.
Nice.
I have a green screen on. The can is green, so if you want to see what the can looks like, go to the Instagram and take a look. But I'll go more into the beer at the end of the show. But Mad Max, I just want to say one thing. The best way I could sum up this movie is absolutely batshit crazy.
Oh, 100%. And that is probably the most narrow summary you're actually going to get. I mean, there's no way to contain this in something. And it's weird because this movie it feels small and huge at the same time, and I don't know how they managed to pull that off, because really not a lot happens. It feels like just one long car chase. I mean, that's kind of basically what the movie is, but just the impact and just the world that it throws you into. I mean, you're in it from the get-go.
Yeah, and I mean, for this movie, I had a complicated history. I didn't think, when this movie, back in like 2014, when the trailer came out, I had no interest in seeing it. From the trailer, movie came out and I didn't go see it, and everyone was like, it was amazing, I was like, okay, well, I'll watch it. Then someone told me like, don't waste your time, it was better in theaters. So I was like, all right, I guess not gonna watch it. So then I didn't watch
did you never see it in theaters?
Never saw it in theaters. So then maybe like 2 years ago, I was just sitting down and I was like, screw it, I'm gonna check it out, I'm gonna watch it. And I was like blown away by this movie. I'd never seen any of the old Mad Maxes, which I think the only link between the old ones and this one is the same writer-director.
Right, and a couple of the same actors. Like the guy who plays Morton Joe in this played a villain back in Hugh Keysburn, I think his name is. Which is fun, I think, a little bit of fan service, but definitely kind of straying away from what they did in the late 70s, early 80s, and really bringing it into a modern setting. Yeah,
and the last thing I want to talk about before we really get into it is I am not a big Charlize Theron fan. I love her in this movie. She is amazing in this movie. Badass. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like this is such a hard role for both her and Tom Hardy, because they're not going to win Oscars for this. They did an absolute, I think, a fantastic job for what they had, but the characters just aren't at that level of complexity that I think the Academy is looking for. But just absolutely perfect casting choices, I think, all around in this movie. I don't think there's really anything out of place, and I think this is one of the movies where you really notice all those departments coming together to create just this crazy vision, like art department, costume and makeup, sound design, like everything was just, I think, perfect and came together just, beautifully.
Yeah, I mean, it won 6 Academy Awards.
Yeah.
And nominated for 10. Nominated for 10, won 6. It won Best Film Editing, which makes sense. Costume design and makeup and hairstyling, sound mixing, sound editing, production design. Like all those, when you look at the movie and you look at those, you're like, that absolutely makes sense.
Yep. Oh, totally. Yeah, and I would have been surprised if either of them had even gotten nominated. I mean, I'm not sure what else came out in 2015, but I mean, there's not a, like I said, a lot of depth to either of their characters, but they play them both, to the T of what they were expecting.
Yeah, and this movie just, I like it the way it starts. It just throws you like right into it, and it never stops for 2 hours, and then it's just done, and you're like, what did I just watch? What did I just witness?
Right, you're like, it's over? Like, that was like 2 hours just flies in this movie because there's no downtime. Every down second is more tense than, the actual kind of like chase scenes.
Yeah. But you're right, this movie is very small when you think about it. It's basically, we start at one place, we car chase to it at a point, we car chase back to where we started, and that's the movie.
Exactly.
But it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, you're wrapped the whole time. I love the, right away. Like you said, it just throws you right into it. You feel like, boom, they swipe the Instagram filter,
yeah,
and you're in this wasteland, post-apocalyptic, just nightmare, and
yeah.
it everything looks barren, and then you see that you kind of get the, kind of what's going on a little bit at a time. You get the cars are a big thing, right away.
Yeah.
Food is scarce, so they're eating bugs or whatever's crawling on the ground.
Yeah,
and everybody's
lizards.
kind of insane. Yeah,
yeah.
That's such a fun scene right away where you can't even really tell it's him. It's you kind of get it from the voice.
Yeah.
I think people were kind of like, oh, that's awesome, that was Bane. There's a little bit of that post effect in there right away, but when he gets thrown into it, there's a lot of fast cuts. I feel like in the first 5 minutes, and you're like, holy, what is going on? Just awesome.
Which this is one of the movies I think when you look at makeup and hair department, it's insane how good everybody looks. I mean, down to Nicholas Hoult, who is kind of not to an extent of a lot of other actors, but kind of he always plays kind of very sweet, very nice, good looking guy. And then this movie's just absolutely insane and bald and ripped up and just this movie showed me a lot of actors' range.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
This movie showed a lot of actors who just kind of are normally those good kind of quiet actors, and then they went absolutely nuts for this movie, and it was so cool to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, when this movie came out, just that oh, what a day, what a lovely day. I mean, that was everywhere for a year after that.
Yeah.
Just even that one scene that I'm pretty sure it was in the trailer. It was probably at the beginning or the end of it.
Yeah.
But just such an insane oh, this guy's he's in a crazy sandstorm and he's just loving it. It's just but like you said, very versatile for a lot of characters who you wouldn't normally see in these types of roles.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I think blows me away the most about this movie is that a lot of it, as much as they could, was practical, which is insane when you think of the stunts and the guy in the guitar on the front of the car, and then you had the people on those poles kind of flinging back and forth as they're swinging. That was insane. This movie must have taken forever in pre-production and production to get all of that right and all of that done properly.
I can't even imagine, just staging those types of scenes because there's so many, moving parts. I think about the scenes with the motorcycles going over the car and dropping the bombs. I mean, that's a lot of very impressive stunt work, compiled into these short, 2-second scenes that are just, just so gripping. And I think the other thing too was this movie feels very real. Yeah, even though definitely. The scope is huge, obviously at this, this kind of this central gathering area where we're, put into right away. There are these 3 giant, sand structures, which are there's no way that's there's no way that's in Utah. They just filmed that, but it felt like they were on site somewhere where there's just a 500-foot tall, monolith, and it's just incredible.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to. When I was thinking about when I was watching the movie again was this one of those movies that makes you wish that there was a stunt coordination Academy Award.
Oh, absolutely. I'm shocked there isn't.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, a lot of these movies are carried by stunt coordinating, and when you look at this movie specifically, the actors do a good job, but the dialogue is so minimal.
Right.
And that it's all about the stunts. It's all about how they did those crazy scenes. We were talking about the guy on the guitar just shredding in the front of the guitar.
Right.
That's makeup and stunt coordination. There's no acting or anything involved in that. That's makeup and stunts. That's nothing. Insane.
Yeah, there's no script there. There's nothing. And I think this movie is awesome in that sense that they do a great job of bringing all those elements of sound design, film production, editing, post, SFX to just give it so much power. I think about that scene right at the beginning when you're not really sure what's going on. You see all the women being milked, and you're just like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
And then the water comes down right at the same time as that swelling intro, and you're just like, oh my god!
It throws you into a world. Yeah, it throws you into a world that you're sitting there am I missing something? Is this a sequel to something that I'm not watching? Because they just kind of throw you into a situation that you're that you understand as the movie goes on, but when you first start, you're I must have missed a movie here. There's something I'm not. Because, like you said, it kind of throws you into, they're tattooing his back with his blood type. They're shaving his head. There's women who are basically being milked, like we said. and there's women who are escaping because they're just used to create children for this guy who's obviously the villain of the movie. And there's people who are like dying, and he's giving them water, but not enough. It's just, you're kind of just like, there's something that I'm not a part of here. But then as the movie goes on, you're kind of like, okay, that's who that is. That's that relationship. That's why that's happening. Yep. There's an interesting way to tell the story. It almost kind of tells it backwards, like giving you the exposition kind of in the middle and toward the end of what that was all about.
Mm-hmm. I think it does a good job of kind of putting you on Max's side immediately, because he's kind of going through the motions right away too. It's very blinding lights, very jarring transitions. He's getting dragged through the mud, then he's like fighting everybody immediately. Then he's out on this cliff, and he's like, whoa! And you look down, and you're like, like your heart kind of drops for a second, and then. That whole confusion, I think, just plays to you kind of seeing him fumble through this narrative as we're kind of getting a little bit of the backstory and trying to piece things together while also, going through it from his perspective.
Yeah. And that one thing that was never explained about his character was that he has these like flashbacks to this little kid, and those flashbacks help him out a little bit, but you never know what the meaning is, who that kid is. Right. Is that him? What's the relationship? How is that, like, why is that affecting him so much throughout the story? These weird, like, like, you and I tend to use this word a lot on our podcast, is like visceral flashbacks, like hands grabbing at him and stuff, but then it's never explained ever throughout the story.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, there's even a scene where he's running down the hall, and it's a couple people. It's like an old man with, hair. His face turns into a skull real quick, and then, Max, like where are you? It's just like, he's, and I think the first line, or the first a couple of lines in the show, he's like, who's crazier, me or everyone else? That's it perfectly, where you're just like, oh my god, is this guy the most sane person in this world, and he's this insane? Like, that's the world we're living in right now.
So I want to ask you before, like, as we're getting into this, what was the moment when you're watching this movie for the first time? And you saw it in theaters, right? Mm-hmm. So you're sitting in the theater. What was the moment that you were looking at that screen and just went, oh my god, this movie's insane? Like, what was that, like, oh my god moment when you're sitting in the theater for you? Because I remember mine when I first watched it.
I would say probably the first scav interaction, like right when she peels off, and they're like, like right after they get into the chase, they think that she's still on their side. She's driving out, and then takes a left, and they're all the war boys are like, oh, well, I guess we're going this way. Like, it's dangerous territory, but hey, we're up for anything. Yeah. And they have the first interaction with the first one, and then when the big truck just busts through the carnage of the other people just out of the smoke, that's when I was like, oh, here we go. Like, this is epic. I mean, it's so hard not to get into it too with the soundtrack. I mean, I was driven by the sound just from the start. I mean, the score in this is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, which is so, I think it's so funny to me that the fact that they're about to go on this, like, they gotta track her down, and something was stolen, and they have to bring this pump up music with them of like this guitar guy and the drums. I love that they bring the music with them and like, it makes the score feel very a part of the movie when the score is happening in the scene. Yeah, it'd be like if in Star Wars they had the orchestra in like in the Millennium Falcon or something like that. Like the fact that the music we're listening to is being relatively performed as we're watching it. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and you only get just these little glimpses of, like there'll be a quick pan over the the drummers in the back, and you're like, oh dang, that's awesome, and there's so much more in what they don't show, I think, than in what they do put on the screen. Even though what they put on the screen is insane. Like that guitar guy who's just flinging around on, he's on like bungee cords. He's got these massive speakers in the back that he's just pumping. But the movie moves so quickly that you don't have time to sit there and be like, oh, hey, that's neat, because then 2 seconds later you're fighting somebody else. Like,
and they're just cutting. Like, I mean, I totally see why they want editing. They're cutting so quickly, but they're cutting so perfectly that you never have a second to linger. Mm-hmm. And it's just going, and you're just kind of like brought along, but it lasts just long enough that you can absorb it a little bit, and then they move on. You're like, okay, what are we doing? Like, you're just kind of watching it. It's like it's so perfectly done. The way this movie runs is like, so if anyone hasn't seen this movie, the basic premise is if you have Max who's taken into this kind of like city in a way. Like
the Citadel is what it's called.
Yeah, the Citadel, run by this insane dictator guy who is just trying. All he wants to do basically is breed with these women that he keeps hostage and rule over these people. Gives them just enough water to be worshipped, but not enough that it keeps them in check.
Right.
And Furiosa, who's played by Charlize Theron, saves the women who are being held by him and sneaks them out on just a daily run to go get gasoline and bullets. And they're basically trying to chase her down.
As I did this morning.
Yeah, your daily... You gotta go to Trader Joe's, bullets, and gasoline.
Yeah, just a quick stop.
Yeah, and that's basically the premise of the movie, is that that bad guy's trying to get his women back from Charlize Theron, who then teams up with Tom Hardy's character as Max, because he's just trying to get away as well. And that's basically the movie. That's the reason I'm saying this kind of like halfway through the show is because that's insane. That's 2 hours of that premise, but it's so good.
Right, it's a game of cat and mouse the whole time, and it's like a little catch up all the way to the end, and then back. But the world that they create around that makes you forget that it's just a simple chase. Just all the insane moments, the character development is just so cool. I mean, the leaders of both of the other factions, you have the people leader who's just this absolute just sycophant, who. Like that one scene where he's like specifically like grabs the steering wheel and steers over people like just to kill them, just for fun, and then the bullet farmer, he's got bullets in his teeth. Like that is just it's just awesome.
Yeah, that was crazy. In that scene when he like pulls the bullet out of his head and then loads it into the gun. Like that was just nuts.
Just one bullet. So cool.
It's just nuts. It's stuff that you've never seen before, which is one thing I love about this movie. It's something that, like, I've obviously not seen as many movies as a lot of other people, but like it's never anything that's like come across my radar before. Like I've seen a lot of movies, and this is nothing I've ever seen before. This is so original in the way of, like, just visually original, which is so hard to do. Like the fact that we have billions of movies, and in 2015 they pulled off something. Like, they took something that was based off something older and still somehow made it original. Like, that's crazy to me.
Yeah. In just, like, a revolutionary fashion that... I mean, I was pretty upset. Like, I'm still upset that a sequel hasn't come out. I just feel like... I think everybody involved has to be... And there's just some, tie where everybody on board has to be on board to do it, and to do it the right way. Otherwise, they're just not going to do it at all. I feel like that's why it's been strung out for so long. Yeah. Nothing that I could find seemed like there was any falling out or like, any weird reasons why it hasn't happened yet. It just hasn't happened yet.
The best I could find was that Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron both said that while they were on set, the movie was shot linearly, but they still had no idea what was going on. And basically they were like hating production because they were stuck in the desert shooting something they didn't know how it was going to look. But they both admitted when they saw the final product of the film for the premiere that they were both like, we owe the director a massive apology. Yeah. Because this was so much better than we thought it was going to be. So
he's like, just trust. Like, come on.
Yeah, you'd think that maybe there'd be a second story of like maybe the gasoline and the bullet farm people are going to go and now attack the Citadel to gain control of a place that has water, food, greenery. Like, you think that maybe that would be a story, and then Max has to come back and help Furiosa fight them off or something? Yep. Would maybe be like a good sequel, but
I could even see it bouncing back and forth between prequel, sequel, because there's so many unanswered questions for both of their pasts, and clearly they're affecting both of their presence in this movie. Furiosa being abducted along with her mother, right, when she was really young. Her mom died a few days into when they were abducted, and then Max being abducted later. With all these ghosts and visions and tremors that he's getting. Yeah. So there's plenty of story there. There's no lack of direction, I think, that would have halted production for any reason.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it could have been budget. It could have been because that writer director is the same guy who did the original Mad Max movies. It could have just been maybe he didn't feel there was enough story to go off of. But, true. Yeah, I mean, you never know. But I would watch a million movies taking place in this insane world, as long as they kept that same idea of keeping it practical and keeping it like in that same vibe, because I would love to see, like, even the little CGI they had still held up pretty well today, but I'd love to see it done like the 6 years later where we are now, having even a little bit of CGI. Because there's a little moments, like, I think the only CGI I noticed was at the very, 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 like, the second to last shot of the movie is Charlize Theron without her prosthetic robotic arm on, and you can kind of see, like, some feathering done around her arm just so that you can't see the rest of her arm. That was it, though. That's nuts to me. That was the only part where I was like, that looked fake. And in a movie that took place 6 years ago, like, that's insane to me.
Right, yeah.
Because, like, I think now... Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the best way to describe this movie in the world and in just, like, production and in a realistic sense is organized chaos.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, like, in the world of Mad Max, you have, 3 people who are in charge of, like, gasoline. Like, the Citadel seems just like order and, control, I guess. And then there's, the people leader who's in charge of accounting costs and everything. But then they all get thrown in, and it's just like it's a turntable, but there's some semblance of order, still that's just like overarching, which I think is just awesome. It's a very, very, I feel like an impossibly tricky thing to pull off. But I mean, I think George Miller did an awesome job. Oh yeah,
which is funny because he has so little directing experience. When you look at a director, like, directors make movies today, they have like Christopher Nolan has 20 years of experience. When you look at him, it's basically the original Mad Max movies, Happy Feet, and this.
Right.
Yeah, I'm so confused by him. I can't nail down what he does.
It's very, it's almost like he had like a dream, one night he's like, I have to do this, and he just like assembled the team. He's like, the order we're shooting this in is not going to make sense. I know this scene doesn't make sense. Just trust me, like, just go with me on this. And I feel like that's kind of how it came together. I mean, I didn't hear a lot about this movie before it came out, and even after it came out, I think everybody was kind of like, is this gamble going to pay off? And it did in a huge way. Like,
yeah, I mean, this was one of those movies that I feel like is so rare. I think one reason it didn't get what you were just saying of it didn't get like that notoriety that it deserved is because this is my take on the Academy is they focused on the actors and how they perform when this movie was so not about the actors. This movie was about the world, the stunts, and how amazing. Like, they just delve into every other aspect of what's in the Academy of costuming, CGI, stunt coordinating, like all that other stuff. They didn't give acting was such a side part of this movie, and I think that's why it didn't get the acclaim that it should have gotten. Is because when they watched it, they probably went, Charlize Theron and Tom Hardy are barely doing anything. Throw it to the side. It's not a big deal,
right?
But that's not. With this movie, I think hopefully will have changed the way people look at movies, and you can look at a movie then and go, yeah, like the acting was minimal, but it wasn't about the acting. Look at everything else that it was about. It wasn't about how dramatic Tom Hardy didn't hold a scene and cry and make you feel something. It was about, like, looking at this badass chase scene made you feel amped as hell, and that should be more than enough to, like, hold an audience. And it was for most people. This movie, I think, did better than most people thought it would before it came out.
I saw it 3 times in theaters.
Oh wow!
When I saw it the first time, I was just like, oh my god, yes! And I mean, if it comes back to theaters, which I'm guessing, AMC always does their little throwback weekends or whatever, I will absolutely be there.
I go back
because just the sound is just, it just puts you right into the world.
Yeah, this is the only movie I think in my lifetime that I didn't see in theaters, and I regret not seeing it in theaters.
We will one day.
It's just because it's such a spectacle. Like, honestly, if it comes back in theaters, I will fly to Colorado and we will watch this movie together in a theater.
Yes.
Because I wish that I would have done it, and I don't know if it maybe just who I was in 2015 or 2014-ish when the trailer came out, who I wasn't up to seeing it, or if the trailer wasn't as good as the movie turned out to be, or what it was, but something just didn't compel me to go see it, and I wish that I would have gone and seen it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think even as big as, like, the big scenes are big, I think the small scenes are big too. Like the very calculated back and forth dialogue, even though their words are so minimal, oftentimes very impactful. And it's just like and like every death. Whether it's a war boy or one of the women that they find at the end. even for a second, you can just like see it in their face, just like at like everything there. I love the transformation that Nicholas Holt's character Nux goes through, because it's really fun to see him, like his reality just kind of come crashing down and then find more agency, you know, like in himself. And I think that's like what kind of all the characters go through. You know, they're like a weird band of misfits that kind of have to escape together and get along if they don't want to just get murdered.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to anyone who hasn't seen it, the War Boys work for the bad guy, and they're so dedicated to a point that their whole goal is to die for him. And Nicholas Holt's character, what's his name?
Nux.
Is probably the most dedicated of these War Boys that we see in this movie. His whole, like, he is willing to basically take his blood bag, Tom Hardy, with him so that he can still go on this mission, even though they were totally okay with him staying back.
Mm-hmm.
Like, his whole goal is that he needs to die for him. And so, but then he realized, like, his whole, like you said, his role crashes down, and he realizes he's not the guy, he's not the leader that I thought he was. There's more to this than dying for this guy. Mm-hmm. Is basically his whole turnaround, which is crazy to me. But, like, I like the scene where, I think it all comes around when that scene where he's willing, so right as they're about to die for this guy, they spray paint their mouths silver so that way they can be like what Chrome in Valhalla. Yeah. And he does this whole thing. He has this whole plan where he's about to kill himself to destroy Charlize Theron. So he spray paints his mouth. He fills his whole car with gasoline. And is about to strike it with what's it called, flare.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom Hardy stops, and that's when he kind of realized, like, he didn't die for him. He didn't have to die for him. It's like kind of that turnaround started for him, and which Nicholas Hoult is completely, for me, like a great actor who's just completely flown under the radar for no reason. Besides, maybe he just doesn't. There's just something about him that Hollywood either hasn't accepted or something. But he's such a phenomenal actor that like he plays. For me, I think of him as the guy who plays Beast in the newer X-Men movies, the younger version.
Yeah, I think of First Class all over the place. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But he doesn't do as good of a job in those as he does in this movie. Everyone, I think, stepped up. Not so much Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron, but every side character. Zoe Kravitz was killing it in this movie. Mm-hmm. She was really cool as one of the I don't remember any of their names because their names don't really get mentioned.
Either. Yeah, they
mention it like once very quickly in passing, like as something's happening, so you kind of like didn't really catch it. But she is amazing in this movie.
I guess the names don't really matter, right? Like he said.
Pretty much,
She's like, "What's your name?" He's like, "Does it matter?" You know, it's just like all these formalities are foregone in this, you know, wasteland scenario. It's like everybody's just kind of flying by the seat of their pants, and you know they're holding on to very few things from the world we know.
Yeah, there's a lot of movies that like I have a very short attention span thanks to social media and just the way the world works nowadays. But this is one of those movies I can sit down, throw on my TV, and just watch from beginning to end without pausing to go on my phone or do something else. Like, I just sit down and watch it because I'm just blown away by how cool this movie is and how amazing it is. You can't
look away.
You can't. Honestly, it's in the best way possible. You cannot look away from the screen.
Yeah, and I'm bringing up that scene where he's filling his car with gasoline. I thought the CGI of the storm was phenomenal.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
And when you see the car just get like slowly lifted up and all the people go out and it explodes, and you know, and you see Nux looking up like, oh, this is it. Yeah, this is my time, like right here. Going back to the spray paint thing really quick. I don't know if you know, but there was a brand of silver spray paint on Amazon that got bombarded with reviews after this movie came out and questions. You know, people would be like, will this get me into Valhalla? You know, with just like this, so many, like, I'm not even kidding. I'll see if I can find it after this, after we're done here and send it to you. But it was pretty funny after the movie came out.
Yeah, I think the way they shot it was like some like cake frosting. Some bakery had figured out like a spray paint frosting, and so they made it silver, and they would just spray paint frosting on their mouths.
Yeah,
but
probably supposedly give them a high, you know, or something off the paint fumes, and then that's like, you know, they're kind of, you know, here I go. Yeah, which I think the crazy about Nicholas Holt's character is that, like we said, he's so dedicated, but that the fact that he actually has the bad guy, which I can never remember his name, Immortan Joe. Immortan Joe spray paint his mouth for him. With his little, little special canister. Yeah, and then he lets him down by basically like slipping and falling, like immediately after after he starts, he's like, shit, my one moment. Yeah, and that's when he starts to turn around. But like that's so funny to me that he got to the peak of it. What every war boy dreams of doing is having Morton Joe spray paint and then dying for him.
and he just flops. Like,
he's like, maybe I'm not cut out for this villain work.
Yeah, which then he ends up kind of falling for one of the wives who is being saved. Yeah. And he's an interesting character, the way he kind of just so quickly realizes and then starts helping our good guys throughout the rest of the movie. But, I mean, there's just so much that you can say about this movie. Like, I was sitting there going, like, how are we going to knock this down in an amount of time? Because, like, we could go through scene by scene, but...
Right.
You just can't convey how cool this movie is by going scene by scene.
It's epic, and I mean, it is one long car chase, you know, when you come down to it. But when you're watching it, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like everything has been building to, you know, 0, 0, 0 at the point of this movie, and you're like, yes, this is it. Yeah, you know, it's like how we felt at the end of Batman Begins, when we're just like, oh. Damn, here we go. You know, like, and that's where this movie started. Like that. I love this movie.
Yeah, this was a good example. I think there are movies that try and overcomplicate the story, and this is a good example. Like, you don't need to overcomplicate it. It can be such a simple story and still pull so much emotion, create so much excitement, do such a good job with even just a simple car chase from point A to point B back to point A, and you're still immersed as hell into this movie, which. I mean, like I said, I'd never seen the original Mad Maxes. I don't know how good of a job Mel Gibson did or what those were even really about. But, I mean, at this point, I don't really care. Like, I just want this is Mad Max to me, so.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I was thinking, did you ever see the movie Baby Driver?
I did not.
No. It felt like almost like trying to be modern carbon copy of this movie.
Oh, okay.
I thought it felt very, very car chasey. Music was, you know, a huge part of it, you know, when they're racing around. And so, I mean, definitely frails in comparison to this, but I think they tried to emulate this kind of style. Yeah. In that movie. But
so this movie's supposed to take place like far into the future. We've already reached like an apocalyptic event. The world is just dust and sand. And this movie is where this takes place, right? That's the whole premise of this. Because they reference the fact like they're looking up at the sky and she's like, what's that? And they're like, oh, it's a satellite that used to bump TV shows around the world.
Right. Everybody had their own show. Yeah.
Yeah. That's just crazy to me the way they made this. And it makes sense. None of it's like, that's a little weird. That doesn't add up. Like, all of it just kind of, it works. And the whole movie takes place. And you're never like, that didn't make sense. Even though it's this really messed up, crazy world. It's awesome. Right.
You're like, how are they breathing when there's only one tree? And it's dead, and they rip it up. You're like, wow, what's making all the oxygen? Like,
one scene I did want to ask you about. So there's a scene in the movie, right? They're going through, they're trying to get to. So the whole point is that Charlize Theron's trying to take these wives to the Green Place, which is a safe place for them to live. And on their way, they hit this point of like I want to say like a swamp, and were those there's like
Quagmire.
People. Yeah, they shot the scene of, like, there's people on, like, actors on stilts walking around. Were those supposed to be mutated birds, or is that supposed to be people on stilts?
I think those were people. And
okay.
Because that was the area, remember when they, so they get to the, they eventually get to where they think they're going. They look up at the old telephone pole, and they see a reflector light. And I love that famous line that's, you know, now a meme of Tom Hardy going, that's bait.
Yeah.
You know, like... I love that. And then, you know, they come down, they catch up, and, you know, she's like, where's the Green Place? You know, like, where is that? And they said, you passed it. And that was what that area was. It was so overrun and just muggy after, you know, X amount of years not being able to take care of it fully, that's what it was reduced to. And I think all of those, I think they called them crows. Like, I think that's what they actually called those people. Were just kind of scavengers around that area, just looking for... you know, anything that they could find in a wet area of this otherwise desolate, you know, barren wasteland.
Because that was supposed to be, like, before that happened, like almost a, like, quote-unquote utopia of greenery and food and water. So, so then those people were trying to just pick off any last bit of that, what was, I'm guessing. Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the one part of the movie where I was like, I don't get it, but now I do.
It's also, this movie, it's kind of hard to tell... a sense of like time and scale. You know, it feels like there were really only like 3 days. Yeah. You know, noted very obviously by the sepia tones. You know, like in the day you have this very stark orange, vibrant, you know, this orange like sand gritty feel, and then in the night it's like oh god, what's around there. It's very lit but foggy and mysterious, and kind of does these day-night cycles, but it feels like they traveled a much longer distance than only like 3 days travel.
One thing I did like about this movie is that when you look at a lot of post-apocalyptic films, it's like you said, sepia, but like that's it. This movie added a lot of color to an otherwise very bland genre of film, which I really enjoyed about it.
And in very obvious ways, you know, at the beginning you have the lush green, you know, in contrast with all the dirt and stuff around it, the water. You know, even the flares that they were sending up, you know, right as soon as they're leaving, you know, the smoke that they're like the puffs, you know, of the yellow and the red. It's just like, I mean, this movie is very literal, but I think it behooves it, you know, to, you know, a 10th degree.
Yeah. One thing I noticed about this movie too is that I remember I was watching it, I was about halfway through, I was like, why is this rated R? They don't curse, there's zero profanity. There's, I wouldn't say really any nudity, kind of. You see like a butt. That's about it.
Right. You see some breastfeeding, you know, but
but even then everything's covered. They're just, but you just imply like, you know, they're breastfeeding. But and then you get to that last, so when they're going back to the Citadel, that's when like the gore sets in, and like Immortan Joe's face gets ripped off. People are getting like impaled and stabbed and thrown.
Yeah, that's when the Tarantino comes out, and you're like, this is a Tarantino movie, but nothing's happened yet. You're like, just wait, there'll be a scene. Like,
because I was sitting there until that scene, I was like, I don't remember why this is rated R. And then you watch that scene, you go, that's why it's rated R. That makes a lot of sense.
Oh, that scene. We skipped over too, but on the way, on their first chase, when Splendid, you know, his pride and joy is like climbing between carriages.
Oh yeah,
you know, for a second we think she gets hit by the rock, and then she's, you know, fine in the back, but then slips. And then that, you know, right when he yanks the wheel and turns it and literally just has no regard for his life, anybody else that's on that thing, or his car, you know, which is like all their pride and joy. Like, that moment right there was just insane. I was like, wow. Like, he just wrecked his vehicle. And then you get the fun contrast between when they're like grieving and Rictus, you know, his I'm guessing one of his sons. That
I think it's supposed to be one of his sons. Yeah,
not quite smart enough to take over the throne one day, so he's still hoping on other ones. But he's just like bah, 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 bah. You know, and then immediately after that they go back to the good guys, right? And they're like, all right, count all our bullets, and they're like, sick, we have 5.
Yeah.
Like, this is not gonna go well, but I love those back and forths. Those were a ton of fun.
Immortan Joe is an interesting character because his whole thing is like, he brings all these different factions into this chase, and they even mention it. I don't know if it's the gasoline guy or the bullet guy, who's basically like, all this for a family squabble.
Yep. Like,
all this and for what? And he's an interesting character, the fact that he's chasing down because he loves them, but his love is so misplaced.
Mm-hmm.
But like, that makes him such like an interesting villain, even though he has like 4 lines of dialogue and he's on screen for like 5 minutes.
Yep.
But you're still like, you understand his point, and like, it's wrong, obviously, but you cannot see where he's coming from, even though he's barely on screen. I mean, there's movies where the villain is on screen for half the movie and talks half the movie, and you still don't really understand his whole point of view.
Yep.
But that's the beauty of this movie, is like, he doesn't even have to be on screen. You still understand the point, like what they're doing, like the whole point of this movie. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a weird power dynamic that you never really understand, but it somehow works. Mm-hmm. Some guy has, you know, the money, some guy has bullets, and this guy's got water, you know, and somehow they all, you know, work in some tandem. But you know, like you said, I think I'm just so curious about the past, you know, how Furiosa went from being captured, watching her mom die a couple days later, to a very trusted position, you know, basically his number one, who's controlling this, you know, massive war rig, you know, in charge of so many people on his side, and never had the foresight to see her, maybe she's, you know, she's stewing. Like, how she got to that level of prowess is just is something that I'm curious about.
Yeah, I mean, what would it be for you, like, if you were going to make a sequel to this movie, if George Miller said, hey, I want you to start thinking about what the sequel's going to be, how would you make a sequel to this movie? Or just another movie. It doesn't have to be a sequel. It could be a prequel, whatever. How would you make another movie in this world?
Probably showing that same scene at the end again of her going up, because that was such a cool scene where she's like almost dead, she's barely on her feet, just showing that, and then it goes black, and then like 20 years earlier or something, and then you see her getting captured. I would love to see the backstory, because I think they're right now where they leave the story, there's more to tell in a prequel-esque film. Not to say that has to encapsulate the whole story, but then from where it's going from there, because I feel like it would just be almost more of the same if they pick up right where they left off, and at some point it's going to be like, all right, they're fighting a lot, like that was a lot of the last movie, but I think they could tell a different story and kind of even make the first movie more impactful with a lot of backstory.
Yeah, no, I agree with
that. What direction do you think they could go?
I think that's how it'd have to work. I think you gotta do a prequel. There's so much that is not explained how we got to this point that I want to see either in one movie or two, a prequel of Tom Hardy and a prequel of Charlize Theron, and see how they got to that point. Whether it's one movie combined, you're jumping in between the two, or two separate movies of a young Tom Hardy getting to, and then the movie ends right as we see him in the very beginning with the long hair and stuff, and then or Charlize Theron's character of you start with that last scene, and then you go to the beginning, and then bring her up to maybe where she decides like I'm gonna get these women out, and then that's where the movie ends or something like that. I would agree with that. That's how it'd have to go. A sequel would be cool, but I don't think it'd have that same like grab that the first one had, because then at that point you'd just be doing what you did in this one again. Yeah, so I agree with that. Before we move on to the beer, though, is there anything else you want to talk about in this movie? Anything that you want to point out, or
what was so you asked me what moment I had when watching it, right? And I was just wondering what your moment was where you're just like, oh wow, this is something special.
For me, it hit a little later. The first time I watched it, because I was blown away, but the moment where they first bring out the people on those poles as they're kind of being swung back and forth, and like they're grabbing people and coming back, the fact to me that was practical blew my mind. Because
unbelievable,
as someone who I've worked in the film industry, and I still have no idea how they could have I can't even conceive how they did that. The fact that they're on moving vehicles, swinging back and forth, it's like Cirque du Soleil shit, man. Like they're flying around,
grabbing other people. You're like, okay, this is crazy.
Yeah, grabbing people, being passed around, jumping from car to car. Like that to me was the moment where I was like, this is good. But that moment went from like good to I'm blown away by whatever this is. Like that to me was when they brought out those pole things. That to me blew me away. Like, but I think one of them was the guitar. The guitar guy was just like, what is this? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
just like what is this movie?
Yeah, there was one scene that I felt was a little misplaced, and that was right after Nux crashes the and it wasn't even a scene. It was, just a 3-second end to a scene. But it's right when he crashes into the, the arch to barricade it in.
Oh, yeah.
And everything looks like it was just, like drag image here and, enlarge. Yeah. I didn't like the wheels spinning it just felt too forced for a movie that had otherwise very polished scenes. This just felt a little obvious, like, oh, let's make the wheels spin and it goes into the skull, right at the end.
I was actually
felt a little fake in a world that otherwise feels incredibly real.
Yeah, that was one moment where I remember sitting there the first time watching it going, was this a 3D movie? Because it felt very like...
Oh, totally.
Like, do you ever see Spy Kids 3D in theaters?
Oh, absolutely.
That's what it felt like to me, was when they were like...
the water driplets going out towards you.
And you're kind of like, okay. Like, that's what it felt like to me.
Like, I don't have a 3D TV, so that scene was a little weird, but...
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. I remember watching it and looking at my girlfriend, I was like, was this 3D? Like, did we miss something in 3D? But no, they just did that for some reason.
That was the only thing. And, I mean, it was still even fun. It did.
Yeah.
It was okay for what it was. It was the end of a very dramatic chase, and I get just like, closing the chapter of that scene. So I guess it works there. Just felt a little out of place in an otherwise very polished movie. Yeah,
definitely. We don't do comicallys on the show anymore. We haven't done comicallys since like June. But I gotta, on a scale, not comicallys, on a scale of 1 to 10, like what would you give this movie? Because I know that people raved when this movie came out, and it ended up getting, I think, a lot better than, like we said, a lot better than people thought. It got a 90 Metascore, which is pretty insane. It got an 8.1 on IMDb. Like, what in your head? Like, what do you give this? Because I would give it personally. I would give it like a 9 out of 10. Yeah, everything I'd want. A 9.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even because it just balanced wise, absolutely 9. That the acting isn't fantastic, but it doesn't need to be. The story isn't insanely complex, but it doesn't need to be. A lot of those things that I think people give those high values for, this movie just has so many things that were done to the T for what George Miller had in his vision, and it all came together.
Yeah.
Beautifully, and I love the sound in this movie. It's
amazing.
Like I remember driving home from the theater on the highway, just dun, 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 dun. I was like, it was just in my head, for months after that. Just like, it's just such an epic. And that the composer, his name is Junkie XL. He's like he's like a European DJ who's done a lot of like trance music, which is like what his specialty is. But I think there's just so many different like genre styles in this. I love when they see the scavs. And there's this weird like techno like interference, and you're like, oh damn, what's about to happen? Like, I'm ready. But 9 out of 10 for me on this movie.
Yeah, I'd definitely say that for sure. I mean, there's just so many parts where you're just watching and like, that's so cool, or how they do that, or how like it blows you away. Like this is one I remember. So last week my dad and I recorded a movie called The Birdcage, very different comedy movie, but it's one of those movies that like if you haven't seen it, you have to see this movie. Like it is is the epitome of the genre that is representing. I think that's the best way I can say it, which sounds pretentious now that I've said it out loud, but it is. It's the epitome of the genre that it is a part of. You know what I mean? Sure.
Yeah, totally. No, I'll check it out. Yeah.
Like this movie, Mad Max is the epitome of an action movie. That's what you want from it. You want amazing action, amazing costuming and set design. You want it to look cool and real and amazing, and that's what this is. This is the epitome of what you want from an action adventure movie. For sure.
Oh, this is the top of the list for anybody who's like, I need a good action flick to watch this week. You're like, have you seen Mad Max? Like,
this is definitely it.
Watch it right now.
Like I said, I regret not seeing this in theaters like I should have. If it ever re-releases, I don't know, if it re-releases in LA, you're flying out to California and we're going to watch this movie.
Oh, yeah.
So,
then we're going to get in line right again.
And just watch it one more time, and then maybe a third if we're feeling like it.
Yeah, because I remember right after I saw this movie, I was like, there are so many scenes I have to go back and make sure I just saw what I just saw.
Yeah.
Because like so many like crazy powerful scenes that only last like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And you're like, that whole setup was just for one quick, wait, what?
Exactly.
And that's how the you're carried through the entire movie.
Yeah. I'll move on to the beer now, if you're cool with that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, the beer that I got is called Radioactive Fallout. Again, it is a green can, and I have a green screen. So if you want to see what this really looks like, go check it out on the Instagram. It is from El Segundo Brewing, who we have had on the show before. I think the first time we did them was on the first episode you were on for The Incredible Hulk. We did Amarillo Gorilla.
Okay. Yeah.
So, they are in El Segundo, California, which is kind of like southwest Los Angeles County area. I actually used to live in El Segundo back when I lived in LA. This is a 6.5 alcohol by volume, a hazy IPA. I would actually really highly recommend it. I love El Segundo Brewing. They have some amazing beers. This is probably one of my favorites. On the can it says, sure, it's a full-on meltdown, but there's no need to seek shelter from this hop explosion. Bask in all the tropical glory of this hazy IPA and let that hop wave radiate to your core. I think that's great.
That's a very fitting. Radioactive what is the title?
Radioactive Fallout.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a hazy
very
IPA.
Apt description.
Yeah, outstanding. You got it if you can't see it right here. So go to the Instagram and check out. The can is like intricate as hell. It's insane how they did this can. The art on it is beautiful. I'd highly recommend them. El Segundo Brewing. If you live in like the LA area, you go visit the LA area. I'd highly recommend checking out El Segundo. And right across the street from them is a great restaurant called Rock and Brews, which is the thing I miss the most about living in Los Angeles. Yeah, check them out for sure. And
tastes pretty good.
Oh, so good. It's a very like. I think it's a good hazy IPA. I wouldn't say there's something that like steps out about it that makes it separate from like a hazy IPA. But like, if you want just a really good hazy, this is it for sure.
Nice, cool. Yeah, I'll check it out.
Yeah, definitely check out El Segundo Brewing if you're in the area. Anyone who lives in California can probably get it relatively easy. I got it down here in Orange County, so they distribute throughout Southern California. But yeah, so I think that about wraps up our Mad Max episode. Adam, thank you for picking such a phenomenal movie.
Dude, thanks for letting me pick. Next time I won't disappoint you. We're just gonna keep, and then, in 10 years when they come out with a sequel, we'll catch up for old time's sake, and then everybody will still be here. So
for sure,
I'll be on for that episode for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. So before we wrap out, I do want to say we have a new logo. It's right behind me right now. New colors, new everything. Everything is new. The Instagram post, the YouTube thumbnails. The other one I just got bored with, and so out of nowhere I just changed it. So my show, I can do whatever the hell I want. So I just changed the logo. So check us out on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Do or don't, whatever you guys want. Enjoy the show, however you want to enjoy the show. Thank you guys so much for listening. I believe next week is going to be Dominic on for the 2014 Godzilla, and then Chris will be on after that for whatever he picks. I don't think he's chosen yet, but so
I'm anxious to see what he does. But both those episodes are going to be a ton of fun. So.
Oh yeah, I believe Chris had Pirates of the Caribbean, The Black Pearl, the first one on the list of choices so far. So we'll see what each decides.
Could be fun.
We're gonna hop in a Discord with him right after this. I have a feeling, so we'll see what he says. But thank you guys so much for listening. Adam, thank you so much for being here again. I really appreciate being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Always down to swap stories about movies. So I'm always here. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back on soon.
Totally.
So check us out and have a great week. We'll see you guys next week.
Sounds
Bye.
Good. Later, guys.